My name is Wawa Orowana, and I'm hosting the series. Before we dive into today's episode, just one thing that we normally do. I will present my screen so I can remind you that you can always support our show by sending your donations in Ethereum, which is kind of like find us on Twitter. Then there is a cash button, and you can send your donations, which is highly appreciated. Anyway, today we have an amazing guest. I think it's been like back and forth. I've been with Frederik. I've been in touch with Frederik for I think since June, and we've been trying to pick a date. But Frederik, you will understand more like what he does, and you understand why he's so busy. Uh, because you do a lot of like really scientific art related stuff which feels super complex. Anyway, I'm super happy that we finally made it and we picked this date, and this is actually happening right now. Thank you so much for joining me. And can you just start by telling us a little bit about yourself? What do you do, and how you got into doing what you do?
That's a big question,
That's
Elena.
yeah.
That's a horrible question. No, it's a good question. So thank you for inviting me. Thank you for all the viewers for sticking with us. So yeah, my name is Frederik de Wilde. I'm an artist from Belgium, working on the intersite from art, science, technology since maybe something like 20 years now. In digital and in physical space. Yeah, so I'm also starting a PhD right now, which is more focusing on branded spaces. So it's architecture, but the connection with digital spaces, hybrid spaces, immersive spaces, and brands. So that's something that I'm doing. And I'm also now a member, let's say, personnel member of the Pixel Math School University in Belgium. Yeah, so these are kind of new important things to tell you guys. So yeah, where did it all start? I think as a child I was always very curious. I remember that my mother kind of was looking for me all the time. Like I was in the garden and I was with my grandma in the garden. I was digging in the ground. And then, I was like maybe 5 years old and then coming back with a shard of something like a pottery and like, what is this? I found this. And, trying to look up where it came from. And then my grandmother said like, that was the old urinoir, from my grandfather. I was like, okay. But I think that's actually what I wanted to do when I was a child, right? Like an archaeologist. And then later on, when Indiana Jones came out, and that was my new hero, right? Traveling the world, trying to find these, special objects. So maybe there was already a kind of little curator or no collector in me. But trying to find these beautiful things and going on adventure. Yeah, also maybe the idea that as an artist you're also kind of cultural agent, right? You can travel through time. There is all this knowledge embedded and embodied knowledge, like in all these artifacts, and it's just all there in the open for you to read it, right? To open your eyes and to go on a quest and make new connections and make it meaningful for you. So I think that's why I became an artist, because I think as an artist you can be generous or you can be a narcissist or you can be whatever you want. But I think there is always an act of selflessness in being an artist. You do it in the first place for you, but in my case, you want to share your discoveries with people, right, and with society, and that makes it quite interesting. So I think I did quite a lot of things, and when I talk about all the stuff I've done to people, it's just like they don't believe it, right? They say like, you lived like 20 lives or something. But so I did an education in fine arts. I did a pre-education in architecture. Then I did sculpture. I was working even in the mountains in Carrara, in stone, in marble. Then I went to Danby in Vermont, in the United States, to work there with the second best marble in the world, which is the Danby marble. The crystals are just a little bit bigger. And what I found beautiful about stone, it is something, every act that you do, right, you chisel in time, you know. So this piece of stone has been there for millions, billions of years, and every chip is gone. Every action you do is definitive. So I found this quite amazing and quite meditative, right? So it's really like you become one with stone, with the rhythm, with nature. I found it really beautiful. So I really enjoyed it a lot. And I remember, I think, I don't know, I was 20, maybe 22, 23. And I went to Johnson Atelier Technical Institute of Sculpture in New Jersey. I was allowed there and collaborated on pieces of Frank Stella, Abakanovic, Louis Bourgeois. And then suddenly there is, I was allowed to go into the stone carving atelier. It was one of these big studios. And I was used to work with a hammer and chisel, so very analog, right? And suddenly there is this huge machine there, like this monster, this like dinosaur machine. And it had a saw blade and, a robotic machine. And there were like two terminals connected to it. So actually, let's make it concrete, right? So Louis Bourgeois made a small piece in clay. And so they could scan it there. And you saw almost like very lo-fi 3D visualization, of that scanned object. And that machine could cut out this big block of, marble to 95% of the original shape, the scanned shape of the work of Louis, for instance. And I was like, what am I doing there? What am I doing in the mountains? And am I wasting my time? Is this, if that is what technology brings me, there must be new modi operandi to deal with, the methodology of producing art. So that was an eye opener, and I think that for me was like, how can I say? I think it's a prime example of the big discrepancy between studying art and, let's say, learning to know the impact and the legacy of, let's say, Marcel Duchamp, and the ready-made and all this kind of stuff. And then suddenly, or Walter Benjamin, the artwork in the Times of Mechanical Reproduction, very seminal book, very important. And then suddenly being confronted with it, right? And something that questions your own position as an artist in what you're doing, how you're doing it, and what is available there. So then I was like, okay, maybe I should stop doing this stuff right now. Because it makes me an amateur. I don't question the essence of art anymore. I don't question the role of what is being an artist anymore. I'm just doing it because I just love carving stone. And I was like, okay, I have to kill my darlings. I have to move on. And this is kind of a repetitive pattern, in my journey as a human being, is that I had quite a few of these moments that I said like, okay, I know enough, and then finished. So I have been dancing as well, so for a company. So for instance, that was also an interesting journey. So I've met Wim van de Kerkers of Ultima Vijs. I was, collaborating with dancers here of Parts and even Rosas, Anna Teresa Kirchmark. So at a certain point, one of the principal dancers of Frederik Flamand, Charles Ladance, he saw me and he said like, I have been seeing that you're quite interested in dance and the scene and the people. I'm giving some classes in Yantra, so it was an evening school, semi-professional. I said like, yeah, I'm really interested in, in dance, not per se to become a dancer, but to understand like how do you deal with space, time, people, contact, touch, that kind of thing. So I did it for almost a year, and then after a year, he said like maybe you should join the company. It's going quite well, and you seem to enjoy it. So I'm very disciplined. So I was there always on time. Yeah, I was there always on time.
I noticed that you are quite punctual. Yeah, indeed.
Yeah. If I don't appear, then there is something else going on. So people know that in general. But yeah, so that was an amazing experience. And then he kind of made a video recording of what I was doing. And so I was more interested in contemporary dance, of course, and tried to find my own voice in that. And he sent it actually to a Concours International de Danse de Paris, and now you're in Paris, so it just makes sense to tell you this story. So it was in the Théâtre National and Forum des Halles. And I was selected actually for Belgium as a principal dancer, as a solo dancer. So yeah, that was an amazing experience. But after that, I said like, it's going in a direction that I don't want to go. So I stopped dancing 100%, but I stayed connected to dance, and I have a lot of affinity with dance and watching dancers. So yeah, because it can express a lot, not only about abstract things like movement, but also if you look at Edgar Degas and the sculptural, representation of dance and the ballerina and stuff like that, it's actually a socialistic, political statement he made there, with the ballerina. So she was from the working class and so on, this girl. And so yeah, in any case, I think the story I told you was really an eye-opener for me. And from there, I think a lot of things changed. Maybe something else. Maybe another project that was fundamental for me in this art, science, technology kind of transformation. So at a certain point, it's a long time ago, maybe it was 2009, maybe already, 2006 even. But I got interested in something. So I work in generally like this, right? I start with fascination. So I become really obsessed by something, and then I want to know everything about it. And then I become curious, and I start to dig, and so on. So the next example is also something like this. So I found an Egyptian amphora, so a vase, right? A vase, Egyptian vase, and it depicted actually a fisherman that was actually throwing his nets out in the Nile. And then you look at all the images, and at a certain point, this fisherman is, catching a lot of fish and pulls it into the boat. And one of the last images, this fisherman is touching one of the fishes, and then he falls back into the boat. The net goes open, and all the fish are freed. So I was like, what's going on here? And so I started to analyze the image of the fish, and it was a Malaparetus electricus, which is a high voltage catfish living in the Nile. And that triggered a whole exploration. So I figured out that it's one of the oldest examples of, let's call it biomedicine, right? So actually the Egyptians, so before the pharaohs and the kings of Egypt, so it's before, I think, 2500 BC, they actually used electricity, high voltage, to treat the wounds of the soldiers, right? To make them heal faster. Or they were using it actually as an antidote for epileptic attacks, right? And so I was like so amazed by that. And then I was like, okay, but if you think about all these kind of, old technology, so people had an insight in these things without knowing how it worked, right? They didn't know the existence of electricity. It's amazing. And I think this is a misconception, of the ancient times, that we do project, from our time to older times, and think like, They didn't know this, Of course they did. They made glue. The Aztecs made super strong glue. They were looking at the stars. Like it's there was much more ancient knowledge, I think, than we think nowadays. Any case, this is a different story. But actually, the this whole code around electricity is just amazing. So one of the old kings of Egypt was called King Nasser, and King Nasser means King Catfish. So they actually gave it a kind of deity status almost, these fishes, right? And we find also the Gnatometes petersi, which is an elephant nose fish, in the tombs of pharaohs. Um, in any case, it's the beginning also of bioelectricity. And that's important because it takes us to, I think, 1757 or something, John Walsh, that actually was drawing the first spark out of electricity. So it took quite a long time. And then later on, we see in the Gothic times with Mary Shelley and the Frankenstein kind of ideas, that electricity was picked up again. And then later on, because you're in Paris, it makes sense. The city of lights, the city of electricity. I think it was the first, one of the first cities to have electricity actually in public space. So yeah. In any case, these fishes are swimming batteries. They're perfect biosensors. They use electricity to see underwater, to communicate. And that brings me to another topic, which is the sixth sense. So they have a kind of sensory apparatus that we don't have as human beings, or not anymore, right? So they have these electrocytes in their bodies, and it's almost like, if you put all these batteries in chain, they produce a lot of electricity. So I can lecture about it for hours. I'm not going to do that because maybe there are other questions, but I think it was an important project for me, because it was so multifaceted and interwoven with history and entangled with science and technology and present and past and speculations about the future, that I was like, wow. But yeah, in any case, that was a massively important project.
Can you please let me know the name of the project? I feel like also I putting it up on screen.
Yeah, the project is called EOD, which stands for Electric Organ Discharge.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Um, Can you hear me?
That sounded like ASMR. ASMR. I can hear you. Not anymore.
And you can see me as well.
Pixelated.
Yeah, so and okay. Before I start saying that I'm sorry, I just want to make sure you can see or like hear me, you know. How about now? Is it better a bit?
I can hear you. It's a little bit better, but your image is frozen. But doesn't matter. You can continue if you want.
Mhm. Yeah, okay. I'm sorry. Like honestly, I think it took me a while to figure it out. Anyway, let's continue. So, um, this is kind of my habit because I have a philosophical degree. Is to take a quote and then ask what the quote means. So I've been reading some of your materials, and so you described art as a mirror and a hammer for society. Hammer is also an object you kind of already mentioned. This is something you are used to work with. So in general, I want to understand what it means that art is a hammer and a mirror for society.
Yeah. So,
God, I'm
um,
frozen on with a really, really bad face. Is this right? Oh my God, this is so embarrassing. Okay.
yeah, you become a
I
painting.
just saw it.
You're in this kind of space
Oh
between
wow.
a painting, pixel art, like a Richter, maybe
And
like
the meme.
yeah, and a Malevich now.
Okay, I hope it will be. This one is even worse. Okay. Anyway, I'm sorry
No,
to.
Elena, my suggestion would be just leave the video out and just leave me with your voice.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Hmm. Okay. So first of all,
Perfect.
maybe you know where this kind of quote is coming from. Maybe not exactly the same, but hello.
Hi, Frederik. Um,
Hmm.
I'm trying to figure out why my Wi-Fi keeps disconnecting, but yeah. I hope it will be a bit better. If it continues like this, I think we would have to postpone because, yeah. Again, we would have to postpone once again. But yeah, again, sorry. If you could please elaborate on this question once again. So the question was about
Hmm.
why
I
you
remember the
said that
question.
art is okay. Okay.
So, yeah. First of all, it's a kind of rephrasing of a quote of somebody famous, quite famous in literature. Literature. So maybe you know the person, Olena. Does it ring a bell? That quote?
No.
Okay, so it's Bertolt Brecht, and he was a German theater man and so on and so on. But he said like art is not only a mirror that reflects society; it's also a hammer to shape it. So yeah, I do think that art is, at least from my point of view, it's not only about representation. It goes further, right? I think radical art is always kind of political in a way. Maybe all art is political, but from that position, it's also something that really can shape society, with symbols, for instance. A flag is another example, can also become an artwork. It's not per se an artwork, but it could become something semiotically. But it could be as powerful as a flag, right? In a way. So maybe that's a good analogy. So yeah, I think that's what it means, and also it reflects on my personal position, how I see myself positioned as an artist in society. It is to actively engage, with society. Doesn't mean that I'm a super social being or something like that, but that I try to put my senses open and sometimes close them all also for all the things that are happening in the world, right? From the things that we can see, the things that we cannot see, the things that are human, but also the things that are non-human, the things that go way beyond our human perception. So yeah, I think from all of that, from all these potentialities, I try to produce art that is relevant for me, and I hope also for people. So that's a little bit what I want to say with it.
Yeah.
If that makes
Yeah,
sense.
definitely. Yeah, it does. So this is, I guess, the part where we should talk about scientific parts of your practice, which is quite complex, and also, like, spoiler alert, I'm really far away from being a technician person, so you would have to be like as simple as you can. Basically, you integrate AI, which is clear to me, nanotechnology, quantum physics within your practice, and what all of this means, both as what is quantum physics, what is nanotechnology, and how do you integrate them within your practice in this sense?
Good question. How do I integrate them? So I think before I even stepped into the quantum world, I stepped into the nano world, right? And so the nano world is a very small world, meaning between 1 and 100 nanometers is a little bit the nano world, nanoscale. So 1 nanometer is something like 1 billionth of a meter. So that's quite small. So let's make it more concrete. So let's take a human hair, right? And you take the average width of a human hair. So the width of a human hair, the average one. And you make that, I think, between probably something around 18 to 120,000 times smaller in width. Then you're around the nanoscale. So that is quite small. What I found interesting is it's a different dimension. It's like you're walking through a portal, like in a game, and suddenly, boom, there is something different, right? A whole new world with a new typography, with a new, topography. So it's more about surface, new geometries, new interactions, dynamics. And if you can bring them to our world, like the world of micrometers, let's say it like that, or bigger, the visible world, the world we can see with our eyes, and you can actually reconfigure from that scale to something we can see and hold in our hands, even maybe. even if it's the size of a grain of sand, it becomes a material, or it has a potential to create materials that have exceptional properties, something that doesn't exist even in nature. So that I found really amazing, and that kind of triggered something in my brain, which actually goes way back, from when I was starting painting, so like a long time ago. And I stopped painting because I told you that, I had often that at a certain point I stopped something. I finished things, but I stopped it and I want to do something different. Because sometimes you have a painter and he studies painting and then he or she continues until the end, right? I'm not like that. So I stopped painting and went to sculpture because I didn't see any room for innovation. And I remember at that time when I was talking like this to my teachers, they couldn't even understand it. It's like, what is this guy talking about, right? So it took me like decades later to come up with a solution. What can we do still in painting, which is innovative, right? And so nanotechnology gave me this kind of solution. And I'm referring to the Black is Black, right? So this almost like a tribute to Malevich, to make a black square or something else. Even I made some three-dimensional works even that are grown actually from carbon nanotubes, from the nanoscale, atomic scale even onwards to nanoscale and further, to grow material which is absorbs all light at all frequencies, and so on and so on. So basically, a material which is 99.9% air, so nothing, of almost nothing, because air is still something, right? And then, let's say, 0.1% carbon, like synthesized carbon in a specific geometry. And that was my answer, to the question I had when I was like a student in painting. Anyway, let's go back to the kind of thing. So yeah, of course, you discovered that nanotechnology is not new, right? Nanotechnology was practiced by the Mayans, right? They used actually nanoparticles of certain minerals, and they made them really thin and fine, like very small elements. But they use it in their pottery. Like the Mayan blue, for instance, is one of these examples, and that's also the reason why it stays so blue and it keeps its luminosity. It's because of the nanoparticle scale. And there are many other interesting examples in the Middle Ages. If you look at the stained glass in the churches from the Middle Ages, like in Notre Dame, because you're in Paris, so I'm always coming back to Paris. And you look at a piece, the big mandala, the Notre Dame. There is nanoparticles of silver in there, right, and gold, and it's actually these nanoparticles and the stacking and the geometry of these nanoparticles and how they are layered that actually interact with light, right? So you get, they call it plasmonic resonance. So this is very technical, but think about a dance, think about a choreography. It's a choreography between light, photons, and electrons, right? And it's that kind of oscillation, which is a choreography, that actually changes the color from, or makes it like extremely red, for instance. And I think one of the reference examples is the Roman Lycurgus cup. It's a cup from the Roman age, and it's green. It looks green. It's glass, it looks green. But you put a light behind it, and the green becomes red. And that is because of this effect at nanoscale. So yeah, absolutely fascinating. And if you look to images which I made actually at university with a scanning electron microscope, it's a kind of special microscope. It's not with light, but you see with electricity, basically. These images are like, wow, like just amazing. You think like you're on Mars or some alien, it's kind of alien landscape. It's a world that we are, and it's here. It's on our skin. It's just everywhere. And I think I found that really fascinating. So yeah, nanotechnology It's crucial. It's really interesting. It started, let's say, around 1959, kind of ish, with a seminal talk by Richard Feynman at Caltech. The title of his talk was called "There's Plenty of Room at the Bottom," and that actually triggered a whole kind of, wild speculations about what we could do. Some of these ideas were also inspired on John von Neumann, the famous John von Neumann, who was also speculating on, like, can machines at that scale, molecules at that scale, build a machine that become a bigger machine and a bigger machine. So in our, from our time, we can say, if you have a printer, which is 3D printer, which is extremely small, just a few molecules, can it build a bigger 3D printer? And can that 3D printer build another bigger 3D printer? So yeah, that was a little bit the idea, to build a kind of conveyor belt which could produce that. That became also inspiration for Philip K. Drexler, I think it was called, also a book about molecular biology, which is called Engines of Creation, where he speculates about apocalyptic scenarios, like he called it the Great Goo. So imagine that we built these nano machines, and we've seen it already, like in Hollywood movies, right? And they start to self-assemble and self-reproduce. They could actually turn into a weapon and just kill us, right? So we've seen that in some of these movies. I think there is even one with Johnny Depp. I think there is the one with Keanu Reeves, The Day the Earth Stood Still, I think, when this huge, massive golem suddenly dissolves in all these kind of particles and starts to eat everything up. So it's this kind of idea. But that brings me to the important part, is that nanotechnology is a paradigm shift in engineering. And why is it a paradigm shift in engineering? If you look at the drawings of Da Vinci and so on, it's amazing stuff, right? But it's all mechanical. And although he was interested in fluid dynamics and all these kind of things, his engineering and things were mechanical. And so what nanotechnology brought was, and that's also the reason why I was the first artist in residence at Rice University in Texas in Houston, in the nanomechanical engineering lab, is because it's an interdisciplinary praxis, right? It's an interdisciplinary domain. What do I mean by that? So they still call it engineering, but it's actually using a lot of, or it gets a lot of inspiration out of biology, right? How can we grow things? And that's not something like you associate with, mechanical engineering. So you have to think as a biologist almost, or somebody who's interested in biomimicry and biomimetics and all these kind of things. So yeah, so that was an amazing journey to be in the lab and to work with all these technologies like chemical vapor deposition rooms and ion sputtering machines and hot plasma and all that kind of stuff to grow something like, this size, which is, let's say blacker than black. So it was quite a feat. So in 2008, I got in contact with Professor Jayan, who was a pioneer in this kind of field, working at Rice University, the home of Nobel Prize winners, Robert Curl, Smalley, Harold Kroto, that actually observed the blackest black in space, in a way. So the C60 molecule, the Buckminster-Fullerene, the buckyball, Buckminster-Fuller, so that kind of stuff. It's a different story, a different talk maybe, but quite interesting. And they try to resynthesize it there. So let's say the buckyball or a carbon molecule was actually synthesized first at Rice University. So it's let's call it the Heimat of nanotechnology, right? So I was there. I felt quite privileged being able to do that. And then in 2010, so it almost took 2 years of communication to get it done, because I was the first artist in residence. It didn't exist, the program, so it's something that we kind of pushed through. We could do that, and yeah, the rest is history. Made quite a few works, and then you have the Anish Kapoor story, but that is way later, and that is kind of almost like hijacking, institutional hijacking of, an artistic, pioneering R&D project with scientists that already were pioneering in this field, right? So it's not about appropriation. My project was about cooperation, pioneering, and that kind of stuff. Anyway, that's also a different story that we can talk about. But does that already answer your question a little bit?
Yeah, in so many ways.
Yeah.
And well, I guess I really want to also dive into your collaboration with NASA, and then also from a point of view where it's been a long debate around whether art and science collide, if they work together, if they work one for each other. In general, what is the intersection in between art and science? I don't know personally answer to this question, but then I feel like you should definitely have some strong opinion. So maybe you can elaborate on this one and also tell me more about your collaboration with NASA. What was it about and what were you doing for them?
Yeah, I think they definitely were at a certain point all together. It was considered like think about the Renaissance and stuff like that. And Da Vinci, we already spoke about. These were Renaissance figures that were looking into art and working into the field of art, into science and technology, all these kind of things. But then after that, much later on, it became so specialized, and we had to specialize and specialize and specialize. We came into this kind of postmodern condition, right? Think about Latour and all this kind of stuff. So yeah, but in the essence, that I think is something that society is kind of enforcing on us to think that we are not art, science, and technology, all these kind of things. We are technology as human beings, and we have all this information in there, and all the information is out there, right? So yeah, I try to explore all these fields and try to reconnect or connect them, because for me that's the most meaningful way. I think a good example, because you're in Paris again, is when you look at the Eiffel Tower. The Eiffel Tower. No,
I love this one. I love this sentence.
Yeah, Paris. I mean, if you said London, I would make references to London. But now you're in Paris, I have to make references to Paris. So if you look to the window, maybe now, and you see the Eiffel Tower, that is actually a vista that Tsiolkovsky, which is a Russian scientist, actually had when they were building the Eiffel Tower. And he was looking at this Eiffel Tower from his scientific background, but speculating like an artist, right? He was thinking like, why would it stop there at 100 meters, 110 meters or something? Why can it not grow into the atmosphere and in the outer atmosphere, in outer space, right? Why can we not create a kind of elevator into the sky, right? And all this kind of almost like poetic ideas. And I think it's there in abstraction, in poetry, in speculations, that art, science, and also technology find themselves kind of, in a kind of perfect osmosis or in a kind of perfect entanglement. So every time I talk with, scientists, although I feel more like an interdisciplinary artist, whatever you want to call it, the first thing I try to do, because sometimes people ask me like, isn't it difficult to, to talk to engineers or to talk with scientists and all this kind of stuff? Yeah, in some way, but in the other way, do your homework, right? Try to forget that you're an artist. Try to, stand there and interact with people like you're interacting with people, not per se like I'm interacting from an artist versus scientist position in these kind of binaries. Try to make that dissolve. Get into the imaginations, right? Just like Einstein was also imagining, how to imagine the speed of light and all these kind of things. So yeah, I think this is great, and also scientists and even technologists and engineers, they also like to get lost in a way. And I think as artists, you're quite good in it, to make a mess sometimes out of things, to guide people into a forest of, probabilities, uncertainties, and unknowns. And I think this is highly triggering for scientists and other people. So I think that's a common ground. So I try to find a common ground as soon as possible and start from there. So and I try to do my homework. So meaning, for instance, in quantum or nanotechnology, I try to read about it. I try to provide myself a lot of context about it. And I try to come up with ideas like what could be the next thing, what could be exciting to do, what kind of experiment. So that's always a kind of starting point. And then also what could be the artistic statement, right? Could I make something iconic? Could it also have societal impact in some way or the other? Could it become a kind of enabler for other people like the Black is Black also to produce art with it? So it's about democratization of technologies. So for me, the Black is Black was a statement, but later on it just became a commodity. And so then I'm not so interested anymore. Then the work for me is already done. The point is made. So after my collaboration with Rice University, I also got in contact with scientists from NASA, senior physicists, people who are specialized in optics. There's a lot of noise. I don't know if it's here.
It's coming from me, I guess, because it's always something, because I'm in Paris, as you already said.
You're in Paris. You're definitely not in London.
I will mute myself.
So I got in contact with these people, and of course they are interested in super black coatings because it's relevant for them in outer space, specifically in telescopes. Because when light comes into a telescope, it kind of scatters inside the telescope. So you get stray light, and that stray light is actually becomes optical noise, right? And then you have to filter it out. But the result is simple. The result is actually that your image becomes much more unclear, right? So if you want to have a sharper image, you want to control the stray light. It's rule number one. So you need something that is robust, coating that is robust, a material that is robust, and so on, so on, so on. And so my challenge actually for NASA was like, can we grow that material on a three-dimensional substrate, right? So I got into 3D printing. I have been printing some works in titanium, and then on top of that titanium surface, we have been growing carbon nanotubes. So that was quite interesting, and so I think it's also a good example of let's call it best practice of how science and artists and stuff like that, and even industry can work together through art also to explore certain problems, to test the limits of things, right? So exploring liminalities, what is technological doable, what can we imagine, these kind of things. So in the end, I think everybody was quite happy with the result, and I think, of course, there is things to improve. But the fact that we tried it out by trial and error, and I think this is also important. Being able to create space for all of us to do that, and to have trust in each other's capabilities and motivation. I think that was, it was just amazing, and I'm still in contact with NASA. I've been there. It's an amazing institute which is now under scrutiny because of the whole Trump administration, which is kind of horrible. But I also collaborated with ESTEC, which is this European mirror image actually of NASA. So in Noordwijk in the Netherlands, they have the technical facility of ESA. So I've been also doing stuff with them. So I think space explorations, bottom line, I think space exploration specifically is interesting because you have such an extreme conditions, right? That that it gives you a kind of it creates a kind of, let's say, space for exploring, let's say, innovative ideas, but also to imagine things that we maybe cannot see, right? And so one of the, it's not my latest project, but one of the projects I did not that long ago with Serpentine, with Alias Studio, is my exobotany project, looking at alien flowers and these kind of things. So, yeah, so in a nutshell, the Earth is in the kind of Goldilocks zone, right? It's in the perfect distance between the sun. And I mean, let's say the Earth is locked in the perfect position towards the sun, right? So where like the conditions that we live in right now can flourish, right? Life as we know it. But there are other kind of exoplanets out there that are similar to Earth with the same kind of ecosystem, maybe, that life can exist. So I started to speculate through AI. So this is maybe a bridge already to your AI questions. So we can use actually generative AI to, when we infuse them also a little bit with, artistic speculations, but also science speculations, a kind of hybrid blend, to speculate how could life look like there, on Proxima Centauri, for instance, right? How would flowers look like if we take into account that the atmosphere is this thick and wavelengths of light, specific wavelengths of light travel through the atmosphere and others don't? How would it influence, life? How would this plant look like a flower? So I found it, really interesting, and especially if you humanize it. And what do I mean by humanizing is, in my specific case, I collaborated with an astronomer, which is a quite world-renowned astronomer, Professor Snick from the university in Leiden, who discovered also quite a lot of stuff. You have to look him up. And he told me about the astronomer's paradox, right? So it's one of the only professions where the, let's say, the researcher can never touch its own subject because it's too far, or it's, there is this incredible distance. So how to create, and then the question is, how do you create intimacy across a massive distance, right? It's like an impossible distance. And I found that really interesting. Can you create intimacy without touching, right? So this is something that really inspired me, and it gave the project an extra dimension. You can look at a flower, but you can never touch it. It's like sad and beautiful in the same time. And so this is all connected to this astronomer's paradox. And it brings us also back to Earth, right? At this point, we're here, we're stuck. And there is a big chance that we will never leave this planet, not in our life and not even the next generations and generations. So we have to deal with what we have, and we have to be, conscious about it and all these kind of things. And that's also something that I saw in this whole ecosystem of astronomers. They're really connected with, by peering so deep into the universe, they are super connected and grounded, in our planet, right? And they feel the importance of it. I had the same experiences with reading about, astronauts. When they come back to Earth, they always talk about the overview effect. So the overview effect is something, it's a kind of repercussion of being in outer space and looking at the Earth, right? And then you see how tiny it is and this black void, and suddenly, you kind of reminded, how precious it is, right? This blue pearl, this pale blue dot, in the words of Carl Sagan. So yeah, I mean, well, doing this project with a different intention, it got kind of, through the interaction with scientists, and through AI as well, it got really enriched in its meaning. It got different layers to it that I found, just fascinating. So yeah, I think that's a good example of that kind of stuff. But yeah, talking about AI, I think for me it started in 2015. So I collaborated with AI scientists in 2015, Wyoming University and stuff. So that's quite early, really early AI art. On different kind of things, I collaborated with people from Google, the Razor team, to in 2016 to upscale the images. So the whole upscaling technology came from Google. So I collaborated with these pioneering Google scientists to do that. I've been diving myself into to AI models, but also into the algorithms behind it. So I have been tweaking algorithms to explore themes of Hegelian master-slave dialectics, to explore memory. If you think about Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey. Oops.
Frederik, I feel like you will be my inspiration for fixing my Wi-Fi immediately. That's a good thing. And okay, so I guess like you finished it at around AI. Wait, okay, I left when you were talking about AI, but also I wanna kind of wrap up a little with this episode and ask you to tell us about the recent project that you will be releasing tomorrow. What is this one about? And I guess this would be kind of like the final question for this webinar.
Thank you for asking. So the project that I'm releasing is on objects, and it's also part of Art on Tezos, which is a big epic event in Berlin very soon. It will also be shown in a gallery, so stay tuned for that. But it's work that relates to quantum physics, something which I'm kind of interested in, and started already a long time ago. But it's new work, but it's based on real quantum data measurements from a scientific tabletop experiment with entangled lasers, where we kind of tap into the lowest energy state of the universe. So we listen to the lowest energy state of the universe to take out some data, big chunks of data. And this kind of numeric stream is then was used actually in custom software that I built to visualize the data in 3D. And this is actually the basis of the new work as well, which is video work, 3D video work, where you see quantum flowers and time. Um, and why time? That's maybe interesting because how does that relate to quantum? Um, well, theory suggests that time is an emerging property of quantum entanglement, right? So it's not like a fundamental force. It is something that is emergent. So it kind of relates to that quite well. And I think it's an exciting series. I know already the pre-sales kind of started. There's already one sold. Hey, that's good. That's more or less it, I think. That's a
Perfect.
short version.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you so much. I feel like maybe if we would find another slot, we would do another episode, which would be additional to this one when I fix my Wi-Fi, but also because I feel like there are so many things we can cover. I think that you have like lots of stuff you can talk about, including architecture and then also science and then also design. So maybe we will even do an additional episode. We will talk about nanotechnology later. But
It's
I just
open
want to thank you
for
so much.
negotiation.
Okay, let's negotiate later. I want to thank you so thank you so much for joining, for being so calm about absolutely irritating Wi-Fi that I have. And well, I feel like you are doing such a broad stuff in such various spaces, and it feels really interesting. We will definitely stay in touch. And yeah, thank you once again. And for the audience, I will see everyone next week. We have another artist who works at the intersection of science, art, and also ecology. And before this, I hopefully will get Wi-Fi power soon. I don't know how it's called. I'm really bad with technology.
You have to fix it. You have to fix it. So I want to thank the audience for sticking with us through all the Wi-Fi trouble. And Olena, Yara, Lola, thank you for your time and all the
Thank
interesting questions.
thank you. Bye.
Bye bye, everybody. Bye bye.